a billion-dollar corporate lawyer walked into Judge Judy's courtroom, thinking he could buy his way to victory. He had no idea he was about to trigger the largest FBI corruption investigation in legal history. What happened next will leave you speechless because this wasn't just another case. This was a carefully orchestrated trap that had been months in the making. And Judge Judy was working directly with federal agents to expose a corruption network, so massive it reached the highest levels of the American justice system. The arrogant lawyer thought he was intimidating a TV judge, but what he actually did was confess to federal crimes on live television, while FBI surveillance captured every single word. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Marcus Blackwell strutted into that courtroom like he owned it. His $5,000 Italian suit and diamond cufflinks sending a clear message. This man was used to getting his way through money and fear. For 25 years, Blackwell and Associates had been the most feared law firm on the East Coast, known for making judges disappear from cases and witnesses vanish before trials. But what Blackwell didn't know was that Judge Judy had been secretly working with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit for 3 months, and every camera in that courtroom was feeding directly to federal surveillance teams, waiting in unmarked vans outside. The trap was set, the bait was perfect, and Blackwell was about to walk straight into the biggest mistake of his criminal career. If you're ready to see how one of America's most corrupt lawyers destroyed his entire empire in less than 20 minutes, smash that like button because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice and show you why you should never underestimate the power of doing what's right. This story has everything: secret FBI operations, shocking confessions, dramatic arrests, and the most satisfying courtroom takedown you'll ever see. The tension in Studio 2B was suffocating as the morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished courtroom set that had become Judge Judy's domain for over 2 decades. This wasn't just another day of small claims disputes and petty arguments. This was the day that would either expose the biggest corruption scandal in modern legal history or destroy Judge Judy's legendary career forever. The case before her seemed simple enough on paper: Meridian Industries versus Thompson Family Trust. A property dispute worth exactly $4,147, barely enough to cover the parking fees for the army of lawyers now assembled in her courtroom. But beneath this seemingly mundane case lay a web of corruption so intricate and so dangerous that it had taken federal investigators 18 months just to map out its basic structure. Judge Judy Sheindlin sat behind her imposing bench, her silver hair perfectly styled, and her reading glasses perched with the authority of someone who had ruled over more than 20,000 cases during her television career. But today was different. Today she carried the weight of a secret that could topple one of the most powerful law firms in America. 3 months earlier, FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen had approached her with evidence that Blackwell and Associates had been systematically corrupting the judicial process for decades, bribing judges, intimidating witnesses, and manipulating case outcomes to protect their corporate clients. The Bureau needed someone with unquestionable integrity and the perfect platform to expose this network, and Judge Judy had agreed to become their secret weapon in what they called Operation Blind Justice. Marcus Blackwell entered the courtroom like a predator, claiming new territory, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere from tense to downright menacing. At 62 years old, he was a man who had never lost a case that mattered, not because of his legal brilliance, but because he had turned the American justice system into his personal playground. His silver hair was slicked back with expensive pomade, his charcoal gray suit was tailored to perfection, and the gold Rolex on his wrist cost more than most people's cars. Behind him walked a parade of junior associates, each carrying briefcases that seemed far too heavy for a simple property dispute, their nervous energy betraying the fact that they knew exactly what kind of man they worked for and what he was capable of doing to anyone who stood in his way. The courtroom itself had been transformed into something resembling a high-stakes battleground rather than a television studio. Extra security personnel stood at strategic positions, their earpieces crackling with constant communication from the production team, who had no idea they were actually FBI agents maintaining surveillance. Hidden cameras had been installed in locations that even the regular camera crew didn't know about, each one feeding live footage to a mobile command center disguised as a catering truck parked 3 blocks away. Agent Chen sat in the gallery disguised as a legal journalist, her laptop actually serving as a direct communication link to the federal task force that had been working around the clock to build an airtight case against Blackwell's criminal empire. The case file that Judge Judy held contained far more than the standard documentation for a property dispute. Embedded within its pages were federal surveillance reports, wiretap transcripts, and evidence of bribes totaling over $40 million that Blackwell's firm had paid to judges across 17 states. What appeared to be a routine Tuesday morning show was actually the culmination of the largest undercover operation in the history of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, and every word spoken in this courtroom would either vindicate years of painstaking investigation or allow one of America's most dangerous legal criminals to walk free and continue, destroying the foundations of justice itself. As the clock struck 10 a.m. and the cameras began rolling, Judge Judy looked across her courtroom at Marcus Blackwell, knowing that within the next hour, she would either expose him as the corrupt criminal he truly was, or become his next victim in a war against justice that had been raging in America's courtrooms for far too long. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about one property dispute or even one corrupt lawyer. This was about whether the American people could still trust their legal system to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. And Judge Judy was about to find out if 25 years of dispensing television justice had prepared her for the most important case of her entire career. The end. Cameras rolled and Judge Judy's voice cut through the courtroom with its familiar authority, but Marcus Blackwell wasn't intimidated, he was annoyed. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with condescension as he rose from his chair like a king addressing a peasant. "I believe there's been some confusion about jurisdiction here. This case involves complex corporate law that frankly exceeds the scope of what a television court can handle." His words hung in the air like a challenge, his cold blue eyes scanning the courtroom as if he owned every person in it. The junior associates behind him shifted nervously, knowing their boss was about to deploy the intimidation tactics that had made him legendary in legal circles where judges learned to fear his presence more than they respected the law. Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her gavel as she responded with deadly calm. "Mr. Blackwell, in my courtroom, the only thing that exceeds scope is your arrogance. Now sit down and present your case like every other lawyer who stood before me." But Blackwell wasn't finished. He had come here to send a message, and he intended to make it crystal clear that Judge Judy was dealing with forces far beyond her television world. "Your Honor, I think you misunderstand the gravity of what's happening here. My firm represents clients who could buy and sell this entire production company before lunch, and frankly, we're not accustomed to having our time wasted by theatrical proceedings." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as Judge Judy slowly removed her reading glasses and fixed Blackwell with a stare that had reduced countless litigants to stammering apologies. "Mr. Blackwell, are you attempting to intimidate this court?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of genuine judicial authority that transcended television. "Because if that's your strategy, I should warn you that I've dealt with bullies for over 40 years, and not one of them has left my courtroom with their dignity intact." Agent Chen, disguised in the gallery, felt her heart rate spike as she watched Blackwell's face flush red with rage. This was exactly the kind of reaction the FBI had hoped to provoke, and Judge Judy was playing her role perfectly. Blackwell's composure cracked just enough to reveal the predator beneath the polished exterior. "Your Honor, I'm simply stating facts. There are certain realities about how the legal system operates that someone in your position might not fully comprehend. My firm has relationships with federal judges, appellate courts, and regulatory agencies that span decades. We don't typically find ourselves in situations where our authority is questioned by television personalities." The threat was subtle but unmistakable, and everyone in the courtroom felt the shift from legal proceeding to something far more dangerous. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout could have managed. "Mr. Blackwell, the only thing impressive about your threats is how predictably pathetic they are. Now, shall we proceed with justice, or would you prefer to continue digging your own grave?" Blackwell's jaw clenched as he realized Judge Judy wasn't going to be intimidated by his usual tactics, but instead of backing down, he doubled down with the vicious precision that had destroyed countless careers over his decades of corruption. "Your Honor, let's be honest about what's happening here," he said, rising from his chair with predatory confidence. "You've spent the last 25 years handling traffic tickets and landlord disputes on television. This case involves federal regulatory compliance, interstate commerce law, and financial instruments that require decades of specialized training to understand. Perhaps it would be better for everyone if this matter were transferred to a real court, with a real judge who understands the complexities of corporate law." The insult hung in the air like poison, but Judge Judy's response was surgical in its precision. "Mr. Blackwell, before I spent 25 years educating America about justice on television, I spent 15 years as a family court judge in Manhattan, handling cases that would make your corporate disputes look like playground arguments. I've seen more real courtroom drama before breakfast than you've manufactured in your entire career." Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had nothing left to prove. But Blackwell was just getting started. He began pacing the courtroom like a predator circling wounded prey, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor with each calculated step. "Your Honor, I'm sure your television experience has been educational," Blackwell continued, his tone dripping with sarcasm that made the entire courtroom uncomfortable. "But what we're dealing with here involves relationships and arrangements that extend far beyond the entertainment industry. My firm has worked with federal judges, circuit court panels, and regulatory agencies for decades. We have professional relationships that ensure our clients receive the appropriate level of consideration for their cases." The word arrangements hung in the air like a confession, and Agent Chen felt her pulse quicken as she realized Blackwell was walking directly into the trap they had spent months setting. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into laser beams of focus as she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper that somehow carried more authority than any shout. "Mr. Blackwell, did you just admit to having arrangements with federal judges? Because if you're telling this court that you've been involved in any form of judicial corruption, I need you to be very clear about what you mean by that statement." The courtroom fell silent except for the barely audible hum of recording equipment capturing every word, and Blackwell suddenly realized he might have said more than he intended. But his arrogance wouldn't let him back down. It never had before, and it wouldn't now. "Your Honor, I'm simply stating that experienced legal professionals understand how the system actually works," Blackwell replied, his voice gaining confidence as he convinced himself he was still in control. "When you've been practicing law at the highest levels for as long as I have, you develop professional relationships that ensure your clients receive proper consideration. That's not corruption, that's just effective representation." Judge Judy sat back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth that would have terrified Blackwell if he had been smart enough to recognize it. Blackwell had crossed the line from arrogance into outright stupidity, and Judge Judy was about to make him pay the ultimate price for his decades of corruption. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker about to explode as she slowly reached beneath her bench and pulled out a thick manila folder that made every person in the room hold their breath. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, her voice carrying the weight of impending doom, "since you seem so confident about your professional relationships and your arrangements with federal judges, perhaps you'd be interested to know that this court has been working very closely with some federal professionals of our own." Blackwell's face went pale as Judge Judy opened the folder and began reading from documents that shouldn't have existed in a television courtroom. "According to FBI Surveillance Report 2847 Delta, dated 3 months ago, you were recorded offering federal Judge Harrison Matthews a $250,000 bribe to dismiss the environmental lawsuit against Meridian Industries." The words hit the courtroom like a bomb blast, and Blackwell stumbled backward as if he'd been physically struck. His junior associates began frantically whispering among themselves, their faces reflecting the terror of lawyers who suddenly realized they might be accessories to federal crimes. "That's impossible," Blackwell stammered, his usual confidence evaporating like smoke. "You're a television judge. You don't have access to FBI surveillance reports." But Judge Judy wasn't finished destroying his world. She continued reading with the calm precision of someone who held all the cards and was about to play a royal flush. "FBI wiretap transcript 4729 Charlie, recorded 2 weeks ago at Romano's restaurant in Georgetown. Tell Judge Patterson that if he doesn't rule in our favor on the Thompson case, we'll make sure his son's law firm never gets another corporate client in this city." That was your voice, Mr. Blackwell, threatening a federal judge's family. The courtroom erupted in chaos as Blackwell's carefully constructed facade completely crumbled. "This is entrapment," he shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Judge Judy while his expensive suit began to show sweat stains under the studio lights. "You can't use television cameras to conduct federal investigations." Agent Chen, still disguised in the gallery, had to suppress a smile as she watched 25 years of careful criminal enterprise collapse in real time. Judge Judy stood up behind her bench, her 5-foot frame somehow towering over everyone in the room as she delivered the killing blow that would end Blackwell's career forever. "Mr. Blackwell, allow me to introduce you to the concept of justice," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying the authority of every honest judge who had ever worn a robe. 3 months ago, FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen approached me with evidence of your criminal enterprise. For the past 90 days, this courtroom has been serving as the headquarters for Operation Blind Justice, a federal investigation into judicial corruption that has identified over 40 compromised judges, 17 bribed court officials, and a corruption network spanning 12 states. The revelation hit Blackwell like a freight train as he realized that every conversation, every threat, every bribe had been recorded and cataloged by federal agents. The folder in Judge Judy's hand seemed to grow heavier as she continued her devastating revelation. "Your firm's bank records show wire transfers totaling $43 million to offshore accounts controlled by federal judges. Your personal phone has been under federal surveillance for 6 months, during which time you've been recorded attempting to bribe 14 different judges, threatening the families of 7 court officials, and ordering the intimidation of over 30 witnesses in cases involving your corporate clients. Blackwell collapsed into his chair as the full scope of his exposure became clear. This wasn't just about one case or one bribe. This was about a decades-long criminal conspiracy that the FBI had been methodically documenting with his unwitting cooperation. Judge Judy's voice grew stronger as she delivered the final revelation that would destroy everything Blackwell had built through corruption and fear. The Meridian Industries case that brought you here today? It was fabricated by the FBI as bait to get you into this courtroom where federal surveillance could capture your confession to judicial corruption. The Thompson Family Trust doesn't exist, Mr. Blackwell. The property dispute is fiction, but your crimes are very, very real. And in approximately 30 seconds, you're going to meet some federal agents who have been waiting a very long time to discuss your professional relationships with you. As if summoned by her words, the courtroom doors burst open and 6 FBI agents in tactical gear stormed in with weapons drawn, their badges gleaming under the studio lights as they surrounded Blackwell's table. Agent Chen dropped her journalist disguise and stood up, revealing the federal shield that had been hidden beneath her blazer. Marcus Blackwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit judicial corruption, bribery of federal officials, witness intimidation, and racketeering, she announced, as the agents moved in for the arrest that would end one of the most successful corruption schemes in American legal history. Judge Judy sat back in her chair with the satisfaction of someone who had just served justice in its purest form, watching as handcuffs clicked around the wrists of a man who had thought himself above the law for far too long. The handcuffs clicked around Blackwell's wrists with the finality of justice long overdue, as Agent Chen read him his rights in front of rolling cameras that were now broadcasting his downfall to millions of viewers. You have the right to remain silent, though based on the last 20 minutes you might want to start exercising that right, she said with professional satisfaction. Blackwell's junior associates scattered like roaches when the lights came on, abandoning their briefcases and rushing toward the exits only to find more FBI agents waiting in the hallway with additional arrest warrants. Judge Judy stood behind her bench watching the chaos unfold, with the calm satisfaction of someone who had just delivered the most important verdict of her career. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to the cameras, what you've just witnessed is what happens when corruption meets consequences. For months, this courtroom served as the final stop in Operation Blind Justice, and Mr. Blackwell just confessed to crimes that will send him to federal prison for the rest of his life. As agents led Blackwell away in shackles, his empire crumbling, around him Judge Judy delivered her final judgment. Justice isn't just blind. Sometimes it's also very, very patient. Can you believe what just happened? If you're as shocked as we are by this incredible turn of events, hit that subscribe button because this story gets even more intense. The aftermath of Blackwell's arrest sent shockwaves through the legal community that would be felt for decades to come. Within hours of his perp walk being broadcast live on national television, the FBI launched simultaneous raids on 17 Blackwell and Associates offices across 12 states, seizing computers, financial records, and evidence of a corruption network so vast it made Watergate look like a parking ticket. Federal agents discovered detailed records of every bribe, every threat, and every judge who had been compromised over the past 25 years, creating a roadmap of corruption that led straight to the highest levels of the American judicial system. The domino effect was swift and merciless. Federal Judge Harrison Matthews, who had accepted over $2 million in bribes from Blackwell's firm, was arrested at his country club while playing golf with 3 other judges who were also on the FBI's target list. Judge Patterson, whose family had been threatened just weeks earlier, voluntarily cooperated with federal investigators and provided testimony that would put Blackwell behind bars for multiple life sentences. By the end of the week, 43 judges had been arrested, hundreds of cases were being reviewed for corruption, and the entire federal court system was undergoing the largest integrity investigation in American history. Judge Judy received a personal commendation from the director of the FBI for her courage in exposing a conspiracy that had threatened the very foundations of American justice. Judge Sheindlin, the director said, during a private ceremony at FBI headquarters, your willingness to risk your career and your safety to expose this corruption has saved our judicial system from complete collapse. You've reminded America that integrity still matters, and that justice will always find a way to prevail. The woman who had spent 25 years teaching America about fairness and accountability had just proven that those lessons extended far beyond television into the real world, where justice truly mattered. Marcus Blackwell, meanwhile, was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His billion-dollar law firm dissolved, and its assets seized to compensate the thousands of victims whose lives had been destroyed by his corruption. In his final statement before sentencing, Blackwell's arrogance had finally been replaced by the hollow desperation of a man who had lost everything. "I thought I was above the law," he admitted to the court. "But Judge Judy taught me that no one is above justice." His empire of fear and intimidation had been reduced to a cautionary tale about what happens when corruption meets consequence. The impact of Operation Blind Justice extended far beyond one corrupt lawyer and his criminal enterprise. Congressional hearings led to sweeping judicial reforms. New oversight mechanisms were implemented to prevent future corruption, and law schools across the country began teaching the Judge Judy Protocol as an example of how integrity could triumph over institutional corruption. America's faith in its justice system, which had been eroding for decades, was restored by a television judge who proved that doing the right thing was always worth the risk. That's the end of this incredible journey of justice served. If this story inspired you to stand up for what's right, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories like this one. What was your favorite moment when Judge Judy exposed this massive corruption? Let us know, and we'll see you next time for another incredible tale of justice prevailing against all odds.